What's up, Gisters? Welcome to The Gist of It, the podcast where two gals and two pals give you the gist of what's going on in the sports world. I'm Ellen Hislop.
And I'm Steph Rotz.
Thanks for tuning in. Steph, what is up this week? It's just you and me. We have no special guests this week, so back to it being just the two of us.
Back to basics, baby.
Yeah, just two peas in a pod. But I'm excited for this week's episode, mostly because I know you're about to go off.
Excited is not the word I would choose, but I'm excited to, get it out of my system.
Totally. Put it out there. And if you don't know what we're talking about, we're really talking about what happened in the NHL this last week with everything that has gone on with Brendan Leipsic and now Brett Hull and all of that bullshit. And it's really caused the NHL to find itself in a similar position, which is fighting against toxic hockey culture.
For the purposes of my anger management and getting through this episode, Ellen, I would really love it if you could give us the gist of what happened.
We'll get to it. Okay, so before we get into everything and go off a little bit on what our gisters have been asking us to talk about and also what they've been talking about amongst themselves and what they've been super fired up about as well, which has been awesome to see across our social media as well as our newsletter, is, I think that it's important to give a quick background on the story with Leipsic and now with Brett Hull. So last week, some incredibly horrible private messages from Washington Capital Brendan Leipsic and other hockey players were publicly leaked. Screenshots of the private messages between Leipsic, Florida Panthers prospect Jack Rodewald, and other friends, including Leipsic's brother Jeremy, showed a pattern of derogatory comments about women, including misogynistic statements about women they had dated and other NHLers' wives and girlfriends. Leipsic even badmouthed his own Capital line mates.
Without going into great detail about the horrible messages, I scanned it all over for you, so you don't have to do it. So let's give you a little bit of an overview of the type of stuff that we're talking about here. So in these direct messages, there was a lot of fat shaming of women. They made fun of a pregnant woman's stomach at one point. They continuously referred to having sex with women as various kills. Mm-hmm. They bragged about looking forward to degrading women during intercourse, and there was a lot of slut shaming. So overall, it's extremely dehumanizing comments about women.
They were so alarming, and to actually see them being written out was like a shock to the system. You just couldn't believe that somebody would actually write down those things, let alone say those things. It was absolutely horrible. So in response to all of these DMs being leaked, the NHL immediately put out a statement condemning all of the actions of all of those who were involved. The Washington Capitals then terminated Leipzig's contract on Friday, and the likelihood of him getting another job in the NHL is slim. Thank goodness for that. Mm-hmm. His brother Jeremy was kicked off the University of Manitoba hockey team, and the University of North Dakota began an internal investigation into another friend, Jackson Keene. Meanwhile, the Panthers have said that Rodewald's actions have no place in their organization, but so far there's no news as to what the Panthers will do with their prospect. So all together, we're pretty happy with the action the NHL took. They took quick action in denouncing the comments, and the Capitals made the right decision essentially by firing Leipsic. And, in a league that's dealt with multiple accounts of racism, sexism, and abuse over really this season, we've talked about all of those topics over this season. It was good to see them, take decisive action and actually get things done quick. So that was great to see. But then, Steph, as the story was spreading on social media, across just general media, everybody was really talking about it. Hockey Hall of Famer and now scumbag Brett Hull went on Sportsnet's Hockey Central and said, "We did the same things, but there was no way to get caught. We would go out to strip clubs, go out to bars, we could do whatever we wanted, and it would all be hearsay. The fun is gone. The game is not fun anymore." And hearing those quotes and reading it, my jaw just hit the floor when I heard that. I could not believe that that was actually coming out of a Hockey Hall of Famer's mouth.
I've heard it and read it so many times, and I still have the same reaction. It's just, I need to take a deep breath every single time I hear it. Hull also, he also complained that guys in the NHL today don't have the same opportunities to bond as teammates anymore because of this.
Okay.
Oh, and I've had it, buddy. Okay. Leipzig's comments were constantly kind of referred to in the media as a mistake, and that this should be a lesson to all NHLers that nothing is private once it's on the internet. This wasn't a mistake. Those messages expose a complete lack of respect for women that's prevalent anywhere, that men are not held accountable for their actions, so including extremely powerful people in sports. And it's time that sports media starts to do better with these conversations and with these types of stories. Hull, and I'm sure many other men in hockey culture, view women as some sort of prize, and poor treatment of women as some form of bonding over the sport.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous that he really said and was saying that hockey's not fun without degrading women. Is basically what he was saying. And, you know, Steph, you're a female hockey player, and I'm pretty sure hockey's super fun for you without degrading women. So he's totally off the mark there. And so that's really the gist and the background of everything that happened with Leipsic and now Hall. And I think to get things started into our thought process behind everything and really what we think of everything is to highlight one of the comments that one of our gisters, Michelle Fong, made on our Instagram post about all of this. She said, "This is especially sad because it shows Leipsic is not an outlier. Misogyny has been and is still pervasive in the NHL. Leipsic is just the idiot that got caught. It's sad to say, but I imagine this kind of behavior happens so much more than we would like to believe, and that most men aren't foolish enough to put it in a group chat."
Well said. My fellow hockey friend, Elena Cremonese, said something to me when I was ranting to her about these hockey bros. And what she said gets right to the point of what we're talking about. And I'm paraphrasing here. So what I don't get is why hockey fans are so invested in loving the sport only if it upholds those same bullshit boys will be boys patterns.
Right.
Whenever dudes shit on women's hockey, I ask, don't you just love hockey? I'll watch anything. But apparently all these dudes really like is the violence and misogyny, and every now and then they make it really clear that's where their real investment is.
That's super interesting.
Just such a succinct take, so thank you, Elena, for that. And I'm sure she'd agree with me as fellow hockey player that hockey is such a great game. It's my fucking game. I love the sport. Youth hockey, community hockey across North America is really something special. It is so powerful. There's nothing in this world quite like the sound of hockey to me. It's poetic. Like, if you love a sport, you know what I'm talking about. But there seems to be a disconnect between the magic that is the actual game and broader men's hockey culture. We need players and coaches and the media to put their investment back into the magic of the game and to the future of the game for youth and for women. And men like Brett Hull use or have used the game of hockey to hold on to their power. And hockey culture is where white maleness prevails, and they are untouchable. And they don't want to see that change. On the pod, we've already talked about bullying and power struggles in hockey from coaches, about physical abuse in the sport, racism in the sport, and now we're talking about misogyny. Lucky us.
Lucky us. We get to talk about all of that bullshit, eh?
And something we have to grapple with. We all have to grapple this, but I would love to especially call on the men in our lives to think about this, is that there are going to be guys in your life who don't respect women, and you might be friends with one of these guys. Leipsic has been described by people in the hockey world as one of the better people in terms of how he treated his fellow teammates in the past. And so that was getting tied to kind of some of this narrative around a shock around how he treated women and talked about women. And that's obviously not shocking to me. Like, to hear that he was great with his teammates and he's great with men, but he's a dick to women is like, no freaking surprise. Like, come on, man. So we really need to start thinking about our responsibility in those moments with each other and how we'll react. So if you have someone in your life who's made a comment or done something, you need to be proactive in your own mindset in terms of what your place in that conversation is. And
Totally.
I would truly really love to see the stars in the NHL. I'm talking like the Ovechkins, the Connor McDavids, the Crosbys to pipe up and say something about this all.
We're going to need Crosby to get social media first.
Oh God.
And then we're first step, Cros, please get a Twitter account, get Instagram, get something so that we can hear from you more. But, I totally agree with you. We need to hear from these guys.
Right? Like, okay, so Brett Hull played from 1986 to 2005, and he very openly said that they all acted like this at the time. We're not too far off from 2005. There's no way that the NHL has solved this problem with one PR statement and by making an example of one player who's like basically a third stringer. Like, if more hockey players don't start talking about this, I wouldn't be surprised that meant that they do it too. They're still doing it, and that they're scared that their own screenshots will get circulated.
For sure. There's a lot of DMs that are being deleted and text messages that are being deleted. And also, hopefully, too, maybe there are some messages that are saying sorry, or maybe there are some messages saying, okay, I need to not be speaking like this all the time. I do hope that maybe there's some change that does come out of this.
100%. Those are my initial thoughts on the hockey side of things, but I'm interested in other examples from other pro men's leagues. Ellen?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to look at other leagues just because it is different to see how culture and the way that women are treated, and also the rules and the precedent are set around different types of things with respect to this topic. And so there's been a lot of scandals with male pro athletes and sexual abuse, assault, and violence over the years, which is just horrible that it has happened so much and that it's such a constant thing. But I think the biggest thing to note is that they tend to get away with a lot, and there's not too much consistency into how teams and leagues treat offenders. So I think for this case, we've decided to really just look at the NHL as that's where the NFL rather, as that's really where the two most recent big scandals have happened. So first, back in February 2018, NFL superstar running back Kareem Hunt, who at the time played for the Kansas City Chiefs, was caught on video shoving and kicking a woman in the hallway of his hotel/residence. It wasn't until the video surfaced in November 2018 that Hunt was released from Kansas City. Hunt was only suspended 8 games by the NFL for violating the league's personal conduct policy, and he was later picked up by the Cleveland Browns and ended up playing the remainder of the season. So this is kind of like, to me, the predator pipeline that we were seeing in NCAA college sports. You offend at one school, you get suspended, but you move on to the next because coaches and teams are just so desperate to win. And if you're good enough, people are willing to turn a blind eye. And, for those of you that might not be familiar with the predator pipeline, we've talked about it recently in our newsletter, and all of those stories are updated on our website, thegistsports.com, if you want to have a look. So that's kind of the first example from the NFL. And looking at a second example, and I think that this one is a little bit more similar to Brendan Leipsic. So looking at superstar wide receiver Antonio Brown. Brown was incredibly talented, just such an amazing wide receiver, but he was quite drama and was known to be a bit of a cancer in the locker room. So much so that in early 2019, he forced a trade from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Oakland Raiders, but then he was still so much drama in the locker room that the Oakland Raiders said, see you later, and he ended up getting picked up by the New England Patriots. 2 days after signing with the Patriots, Brown was accused in a civil lawsuit of sexually assaulting a woman who had been his personal trainer on 3 occasions between 2017 and 2018. Right after that, New England and the league opened up an investigation. 10 days later, horrible, misogynistic, and really scary texts were leaked from Brown. Again, something really similar to what we've seen. And he was released by the Patriots and hasn't been re-signed since. So who knows, maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back with respect to this case.
It's such a disheartening story to hear. And like, I honestly can like continuously think like, when will leagues start to care about women more than their star players, or like care about women's health and well-being over their bottom line?
But even, you know what? Like, over their bottom line, but also for their bottom line. Like, women are the fastest growing segment of sports fans. And we also have the most purchasing power. Like, if you don't have women supporting your brand, what are you doing? Like, if you don't have female sports fans, and if female sports fans aren't supporting the NHL, NFL, etc., or don't feel proud to be, what are you doing? Like, you're losing out on so much opportunity from a bottom line perspective too, let alone that moral side, you know?
You're very right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, like I just it's hard. It's like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? So anyway, I think that both of these stories kind of relate back to Leipsic too, because as you mentioned, he was a third or fourth liner. He was an expendable player, and he really didn't make as much as maybe he thought that he did. He didn't make that big of an impact on the ice. They could have easily found somebody else to replace him. And so I can't really help but wonder how Leipzig's lack of star power factored into the Capitals' decision. Similar to Antonio Brown being a cancer in the locker room factored into the Patriots' decision, and that neither of them were worth the PR risk or worth going through the risk of having them on their team. You know what I mean? But if, say, Captain Alexander Ovechkin, so Washington Capitals captain Alexander Ovechkin, one of the greatest hockey players of our generation, had been involved, would we have seen the same reaction? Would the reaction for Alexander Ovechkin be similar to that of Kareem Hunt?
These are questions that we can't really answer ourselves, but like, I'm freaking ready for some change. Like,
yes,
it's gonna take some more than a few statements and policy changes from the NHL for this to come about. And like, I've been told on many occasions that people will not listen to what I am saying if I am angry, but I think that anger is such a useful tool here. And we should all be angry about sexism and racism and bigotry in our favorite sports. They have no place in our sports. And I think we can really mobilize that anger as fans and as a sports community. And it's so clear that the entirety of the NHL needs some sort of anti-oppression training, and as well as like the AHL, the American Hockey League, and as well as the junior leagues. And you can even trickle that down into minor hockey because this starts somewhere. So it needs buy-in from the players, current and former, looking at you, Brett Hull, and it needs buy-in from media, fans, coaches, officials, you name it. We all have to be in this.
Hear, hear. Okay, so that was a heavy conversation, but it was also a very important conversation. But I think we need to close off the podcast by talking about some more light things. And so we're going to go back to our regular segment and talk about things that made us say, wow, that was fun, to help put a smile on your face during these weird and challenging times that we're living in.
Okay, let's get to the first one, Ellen. So first up, U.S. women's national soccer team superstar Alex Morgan had her baby girl, Charlie, on Thursday, just in time for Mother's Day. And this is really great coming off of our conversation about motherhood and maternity leave in last week's podcast. This is very exciting news. Always love to hear of a new healthy baby in the world.
Yes, we always love the stories of new babies coming into the world, especially from, sporty moms. It's always super fun to see, and so excited for Alex Morgan. And something else that we're super excited about, and that is super fun, is that Guy Curry of Brazil at 11 years old this week became the first skateboarder to do a 1080 on a vertical ramp, which is a pretty big deal to be breaking that record at 11 years old.
Like, what is a 1080? I'm blanking.
Yeah, so 1080 and things like skateboarding and snowboarding and all of that stuff is really just spinning 3 times in the air without touching the ground. So it's like 360 is 1 time in the air, and then 360 times 3 is 1080. And so that's where we are. And what's really cool about this, and I grew up figure skating, so I will relate it back to that, is that he basically just did a triple Salchow, but on a skateboard in the air on a vertical ramp at 11 years old.
Do skateboarders not have fear? This is amazing.
I don't think they have any ounce of fear. They're one of those adrenaline junkie sports. And I thought that you would love the story, Steph, because you love Avril Lavigne. And Avril Lavigne's hit song is Skater Boy. So this is right up your alley.
You know, got to spell it B-O-I if you're really a skater boy. All right, that's the gist of it from Ellen and I. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you heard, tell all your friends and subscribe to the gist of it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher. And while you're there, please rate us 5 stars and leave a review.
And in case you missed it, the Gist creates sports content, experiences, and community that's by women and for all sports fans. If you like what you heard today, you have to check out our free twice-weekly newsletter, where every Monday and Thursday morning, we give you the gist of what's going on in the sports world. If you haven't yet, subscribe at thegistsports.com. If you have a question you want aired and answered on the pod, email us at pod@thegistsports.com or DM us on Instagram at thegistnews.ca or at thegistusa. I'm Ellen Hislop.
And I'm Steph Rotz.
And this has been The Gist of It. See you next Wednesday.